Hello, this is Heather Rowan Robbins. We've had some minor technical difficulties, but Mercury is absolutely stationary. It turns retrograde tomorrow night. And when Mercury is stationary, it is most frustrated. So Mercury turns retrograde for 3 weeks, 3 times a year. It turns retrograde tomorrow and then turns direct on the first day of spring, a few hours after the the vernal equinox on March 20th. Mercury is most difficult right as it's stationary and right as it changes directions. Mercury likes to move. It rather would move backwards than move forward than not move at all. So just be patient with each other and take a good book with you whenever you're waiting during this time. Mercury retrograde is good for many things. It's good for introspecting, catching up on old work, doing what we need to do, but it can bring the technical difficulties with it. Now, this is the chart for today, and we've got some very interesting pieces going on here. You've been watching Saturn went into Aries a week ago, conjunct Neptune, and Saturn and Neptune, Saturn last went into Aries for the first time the day that the American Civil War began. This time, when we see Saturn, we think of Saturn as control, organization, you know, being executive function, and it bones, teeth, lines, boundaries, conjunct Neptune. Now, one of the things that's going to be doing for many people is asking us to look at how do we Neptune? Do we need to add spiritual discipline to our spirituality? As Saturn asks for structure, it asks us to put in some sweat equity. Or do we need to control something about our addictions and our negative Neptune, our challenging Neptune, which is our can be on a good day our hunger for more than the material world, and on a bad day it is our tendency to want to be out of here. So it's kind of to look at how do we give ourselves healthy time out of the gritty realities of the world and into the mystical side. But it's interesting that it came as the Mexican army, a very Mars in Aries, I mean Saturn in Aries phenomenon, killed the head of the drug cartel, and the drug cartel argued back. And we have just terrible mess. Friends of mine who've been sheltering in place for days in Mexico, really worried about what's going on because it can get bad. So I think there's going to be an ongoing issue, particularly this month while they're so close together, that we need to keep an eye on and have empathy for. But we can look at it in our own lives. Where are our addictions? Where are we saw Saturn Neptune last night, I think, in the president's speech, where we had someone who is supposedly in executive function with negative Neptune, with illusions and gaslighting and stories rather than any facts. That's not fact checking well at all. CNN, who has a pro-Trump president, fact checked ruthlessly, and so did NPR. So that's Saturn to Neptune. It's asking us, it says, wherever we have an illusion, we have to be able to dream big and then put sweat equity, Saturn, into our dreams. But where we dream instead of dealing with the reality, that's like looking at a map and imagining that we're in Tibet when we're in Hoboken. The map won't work. So, or the other way around. So it's important that we be honest with ourselves with ruthless honesty about what's working in our lives, what's not, and where do we want to put some effort into it rather than complain. Now, it's interesting that it's connected to rebellion. It is so forward. And I'm looking so forward to my conversation that starts in a few minutes with Sunmi, an astrologer from um, Santa Fe, from Minneapolis, of all my old hometowns, from Minneapolis, where who's head of the NCGR chapter there. And I'm talking about the astrology of both the city, the state, and the events recently. It's got some really juicy material coming through on that. But let's talk about the rest of the month for a few minutes. Um, this, so, astrology the aspects don't hit us so much the day it happens, but the intersecting set. So this weekend, Mercury turns retrograde tomorrow On Friday, we have an exact Mars-Uranus square. And when we look at today's uh, piece, we can see that coming up, and that Mars-Uranus square from 27 to 26, so it's going to be exact by Friday. That's a very, it happens, a couple times, once a year or so, but it can really challenge us. A square can feel like two cars coming in at right angles. It'll be in orb last week, this week, and next week. It brings out the erratic and our temper. Are we on course? Are we having mechanical problems? I got my wood pellet stove fixed yesterday because it all went out, but it got fixed. We can shift things. Uranus shifts. It shifts what's stuck. If it's been stuck for too long and there's too much pressure behind it, it can be like a dam bursting and breaking through. So it's a time to be careful, to drive defensively, to look at what's going on, but also use that energy for the potential of some real breakthroughs. Just watch where you're going and make life an exercise in attention. And on Monday, March 2nd, we have an eclipse coming up. Do I have the picture of it? I don't think I have a picture of it at the moment. That an eclipse coming up that is going to be from Virgo to Pisces, and it's echoing off the last eclipse, which hit right on the 2 weeks ago. It hit right on um, the moon of our country in the original July 4th chart, and we're seeing shifts in the country, changes that are going on, and noticing that we are being eclipsed. Because often when you look at an eclipse, what is it cutting out? What is it eclipsing? I think of eclipses as astrological acupuncture. They form energy that pokes through and asks us to unblock blocked energy. And if we've got nothing blocked, it's not a problem. If there is something that you've been waiting to do, it can open up, or a realization can come to you. And I think watching how America is at the moment being upstaged by progress in other countries is one of the pieces that we're seeing as America steps back from the country and the eclipse hits right on our progressed moon, our natal moon. And the progressions are also interesting. So I'm going to ask you on this week to look at what you want to full moon in Virgo. What do you want to clear and clean out of your life? It's a good time to do pre-spring cleaning, but not so much the busyness, because we want to keep it slow and steady with these aspects. But what do you need to let go? What do you need to remove? What do you need to release? Is that a self-criticism? Is that an Epstein file? Is that what can we do to really clear and clean the clutter and come down, like clear and clean a garden, getting ready to plant the new seeds? So that's my feeling on this eclipse coming up this week. On March 6th through the 8th, there's a series of aspects that's going to be pretty intense. Venus heads into Aries and increases the emotional fervor. And Venus in Aries tends to, with any Aries, and we're moving into Aries season, where all the personal planets are going to hit it at some point. And that's, as one of my Aries friends said, that's the ready, aim, ready, fire, aim aspect that we tend to shoot before we really made sure that we're shooting correctly. And when to think about that whenever you and launch into this, because it's initiatory energy, it's very exciting, but we want to make sure that we look where we're going, that we're igniting what we choose to ignite. And there is a lot of fuel lying around with Saturn and Neptune in Aries, which every planet that goes into Aries will be conjuncting. And with Mars square Uranus, a lot of energy in the air. So when a problem starts, it can explode quickly. So we want it to calm down a bit. I think also with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, we may see, and the Mars-Uranus, we may see some real earth moving. I'm watching the earthquakes around the Ring of Fire. We've had several minor earthquakes here in Montana this last month. and that we're going to see some shifting and changing. And one of the pieces that a geologist pointed out is where there are small earthquakes won't be the problem. It's where the plates get stuck and aren't shifting the way they need to shift. They aren't evolving, they aren't moving, they aren't breathing with the mother. That's where the big earthquakes can happen. And we can look at that in our own life. Where are we not shifting where we need to shift? And how can we make those small, regular adjustments to the changes in the world? Because this world is changing so radically in the year ahead. You know, Uranus heads into Gemini and starts its 5 trines in a row over 3 years, over 2 years in April. We've got a series and that joins the rest of the planets this summer. We will have 4 major outer planets at 4 degrees, all aspecting each other. There's a lot of change. Our world is evolving, and we have to be ready to roll with it and to direct the evolution rather than try to get stuck in the past. So that's my suggestion for this year. This month, I would ask you to play it not safe, but play it conscious. Let it be a dance. There's a lot of shifting and changing that we need to make with one another. There's a lot of fire up in the heart and impatience that we have. But can we ease into this, into the future? Now, I want to introduce you to my guest, and who I met when I went to speak at the NCGR chapter. I used to be president of the chapter in Minnesota, and she is now. And I want that she lists herself as the conscious creatrix, and her Sunmi is, and I think that's just the beginning of her name, has really a really interesting mind and view of the of Minnesota. So I want to bring her on and ask her, what would you like us to say about you, Sunmi? Hold on, let me get that plugged in. Uh, Add you to the, yep, there you are. You are on. Introduce yourself, my dear.
Sure. Thank you, Heather, for inviting me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And yes, my name is Sumi, short for Sumasola Banjo Arabaji, and I'm currently the president of the Minnesota chapter of NCGR, the National Council for Geocosmic Research. And yes, we did meet a few years back. I was still pregnant at the time, and you did a talk for us back in 2024, I believe, early 2024. And we had a great conversation, and I just currently at the chapter, I host monthly meetups. We actually have a free meetup happening later today. And we also host presenters and speakers like yourself to share what they've been doing in the astrological world, their insights, anything, and their research as well. So if anyone is interested in hearing on what the Minnesota chapter has going on and the speakers we're putting on and the events we have happening, please feel free to check our website at ncgrnorthstar.org. Personally, on top of what I do for NCGR, I also have my own astrological practice where I work with clients one-to-one through astrology and tarot consultations. I also am finishing up a 2.5-year program at the Oracular School of Astrology, where I study closely with Michael A. Bryan. He is a phenomenal astrologer, phenomenal teacher. I can't recommend him enough. And a lot of the things that I will be discussing and some of the stuff that I noticed in the chart of Minneapolis and the recent eclipse chart, not this recent, but the one back in September, and what's been happening with the transits to the city of Minneapolis and how it has influenced a lot of the upheaval and chaos and conflict that we've been experiencing through the ICE activity here. So yes, and finally, I am an artist as well. That is one of my ways to decompress after all of the brain activity that I do with NCGR and astrology and being a mom and all of that. So that is also something that I thoroughly enjoy doing.
That's wonderful, and thank you, Sunmi. And I've always liked your perspective when we share astrology.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been looking at, since our conversation when we were getting ready for this last week, I've been looking at the Minnesota chart, the Minneapolis charts, and I took them because we don't have a birth time for them. I took them back to the geodetic versions of it, which starts with 0 Aries over uh,
Mm-hmm.
where 0 Aries is on the map. And I thought, for one thing, that what I hadn't realized when I first looked at the charts is that we're in a Neptune return for the state. It started, Minnesota itself, and we think of Minnesota. Mini means water, and so
Mm-hmm.
Minneapolis, Minnesota are the lands of the water. And Minnesota geodetic puts Neptune right on its ascendant, and that Neptune story seems to be such a part, both the land of lakes, as it was once called, and there's 24 lakes in Minneapolis itself, and the role of the martyr in the history of Minnesota, which is really powerful. So Minnesota had just finished a Neptune return, and it's in right at the heart of a Uranus return, which
Mm-hmm.
was um, really surprising to me. And when we go to Minneapolis, and I want to hear your take on this one, it is for the geodetic, we have that lineup of Pisces with Venus and Aries. And right now, that Saturn Neptune is sitting right on Venus. But since the beginning of this I went and looked back at the Mankato hanging, and I'm going to bring that chart up in a minute, when because there's a real echo between the hanging of 37 native people in Mankato after a war, when they were mad that Minnesota was not paying its bill to them for the land, for use of the land. They were just
Mm-hmm.
using it, and they had stopped paying them, and they started a war. And at the end of that war, they killed these 37 men. So the but that role of what um of the martyr, of the offering, it just that it was born Minneapolis with the sun conjunct Neptune, and with this whole lineup in, and on the new moon, on the full moon, and the eclipse on March 3rd is going to be at this degree. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be echoing it right off. So what have you saw when you've been looking at this chart?
Yeah, I mean, where do I even start, really? I mean,
Yeah, I know.
the foundation of Minneapolis, when I
Mhm.
look at this chart, it really depicts an interesting story of it depicts the story of Minneapolis very well. I mean, for example, I mean the Sun Neptune conjunction there we do have a history of idealized leaders, and also leaders who, may put up an illusion as well. We've always had the mayors throughout history have been ones that have created policies based off idealism, wanting to be a martyr, wanting to be for the people. But then we've also had leaders, and in my opinion, are some current leaders who may not be who they say they are, who may not actually be supporting the city in the way that they purport themselves to be. So that Sun Neptune can be something that can is something that I think the people of Minneapolis are starting to realize, that, oh, maybe there's something more to the story in regards to what our leaders are saying that they're doing and what is actually the truth. And additionally, another thing that I thought that was very interesting was that Uranus is, if I can, I'm just looking, Uranus is conjunct the node, and the lunar node I found to be, and in my studies with at the oracular school, the node represents connections, intimate connections, personal relationships, and ways that we connect with each other, because it's the node of the moon, and the moon is relationary. It's the people in mundane astrology, if you think of it that way. So the fact that Uranus is there tells me that we are a people of industry. We're commercialized people. And it reminds me back to the time where Minneapolis was at once considered the number one flour mill in the world, which is why we were originally noted Mill City. So it's that industrial is
That's
embedded
a
in
good
the
point.
DNA. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the industry is embedded in the fabric of the city of Minneapolis. Um, and also the spirit of enterprise as well. If you look at as well, we have Mercury, which is at 17 degrees Pisces. It's 3 degrees away from Mars. Mercury, Mars, what I see in a mundane aspect, in a mundane perspective, is that spirit of enterprise. Mercury is commerce, it's transportation, it's how we relate to each other in a trade basis. And then of course Mars is the action that we take forth towards that. So it's that we are a very entrepreneurial city. And I think that is reflected heavily because we have so many small businesses here in Minneapolis, small coffee shops, mom and pop shops, gas stations. It's at every corner.
Yeah.
So I think that is really interesting to see that as well.
You're making me miss Minneapolis.
It's a great city. You got to come
It is.
back more often. Um, but another thing that I wanted to point out that I thought was also interesting was let's see here, was the Saturn in a square to the moon. And there are two things that this can denote. One, it could denote that the people, if you look at the moon at a mundane level, the people are we're disciplined, we're traditional, we're hardworking, right? All the great things about Saturn. But if you look at it at universally, it could be the people versus authority. If you think
Right.
of the square as that
Yeah.
tension point,
That sun moon squaring, both squaring that Saturn.
exactly,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because we've had a history in the city of Minneapolis and even the surrounding cities, St. Paul and in the suburbs as well, of just always having to go against authority. And let me just pull up my notes here to make sure I know exactly where I want to point to. So this is especially interesting to me because one of the minor hidden aspects that I had to look for was that Mars is actually in a parallel relationship to Pluto. I don't know if you are
Mm-hmm.
able to
Mm-hmm.
show that
Mm-hmm.
here, but Mars Pluto parallel. And before I get into it, but for people who don't know, a parallel is an aspect which denotes. Let me see here. Make sure I had
It's
it right.
it's if it's like a conjunction because they're on
Yeah,
the same latitude above or below the horizon, and we don't
exactly.
show those. That only shows up when you do the details,
Mhm.
but it's really it's a very strong echo. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So that Mars Pluto parallel basically depicts brutality, and brutality and force is embedded in the foundation of the city. For example, in the 60s and 70s, we had uprisings in response to police brutality, specifically on Plymouth Avenue in 1967, I
Mm.
believe. And then, of course, we had George Floyd just 6 years ago. And then, and then we also had the ICE murders that happened with Renee Good and Alex Pretty. So this is a common theme that has been happening in the city where there's brutal force happening, and we as people constantly are always fighting back, right?
Right.
Um, and I think that
I,
is it. Oh, go ahead.
this is the. I mean, I agree with you. I saw that the series of Neptune went into um, when Neptune went into Pisces, we began to do this repeat of the victim, the martyrs, like we saw at the very beginning in the
Mhm,
Mankato murders, the murders. But
mhm,
Neptune, the progressed. This is the progressions and the aspects for the killing of Philando Castillo and in 2016, and that was the beginning of a series of martyrs. There's been Philando Castillo, George Floyd, the kids that were shot in their Catholic school,
yep.
and
Mhm,
then Renee Good and Petty. So it's been one martyr after another in national audience with that Sun Neptune conjunction, Neptune sitting right on it, going across that. And this was when Philando and I was at his funeral. It was amazing, powerful, and that was a tight Uranus return to the finding of Minneapolis and the Neptune return,
Mm-hmm.
and that whole archetype of um, the and I have George Floyd here somewhere too, but we can go straight to the Renee Good's death, and that because you had some really interesting points you made. If I can find where I went to the death of Renee Good, I don't have it on Minneapolis yet, but I have. This is the moment because we have an exact time of when she died,
Mm-hmm.
and want to talk about that chart because you were had front row seats.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't look at this chart directly because I was looking more at the transits. However,
Hmm.
this is very important to note that how gosh, I don't even know where to start because the Renee Good killing a it was an event that was activated by, in my opinion, the September 2025 eclipse, because during that eclipse, we had that sun moon conjunction directly opposite Mars, about 9 degrees. It was opposite Mars, which was opposite the city of Minneapolis's Mars. And that Mars, in a sense, was activated. The way that I have learned eclipses is that they are activation points that trigger events, that trigger destinies that are, when you have your natal chart or your birth chart, there are certain destinies that remain dormant and they don't get activated until certain parts of your lives and certain transits happen. And eclipses are a great activation event for certain things to happen. So when Mars was activated, it pretty much charged up that eclipse Mars to pretty much cause mayhem throughout the city. And unfortunately, Renee Good, Alex Preddy were part of that mayhem. And if I look at this Renee Good chart, let me take a look here to see what stands out, because I
Can
have
you
not.
that huge lineup of planets in Capricorn that we could see that misuse of power. You got that
Yep.
very muscular lineup. And there were other major events going on in the world at the same time, very muscular events.
Mm-hmm.
There was the killing in Iran of over 1,000 protesters at almost exactly the same moment within less than 24 hours with this lineup of Capricorn. And Capricorn is muscular, but it can be muscular good. It doesn't
Right.
have to be negative, but
Mm-hmm.
it can be if it's often what do you feel if you feel your power is challenged, how do you respond? And that's where I see the lineup. Both of those were cases of suppression of people questioning power.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's, and I mean, if you go back to the original foundation of Minneapolis, that Sun Neptune, now, as a people, we're like, what are our leaders doing? There's this disillusionment towards our leadership now. Like, what's going on? How are you protecting us? How are you advocating for us? Are you truly stepping up the way that you say you're going to step up? I've a lot of people in the community are thinking about who they're going to vote for these upcoming elections. Who has the answers? Who has the solutions to help the city of Minneapolis when we feel as though we're being attacked by outside forces? Um, so I thought that was, I think that's a
Excellent
question.
question.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
a very excellent question. Where do we go from here, right? And I also wanted to go back as well to what I mentioned about the eclipse chart. And is it okay if I share? Because I did pull it up on
Oh
my
yes, please do.
okay. Because I feel like it'd be better to explain it as I'm showing it.
And
Um,
I was just trying to pull up the tri-wheel for um, the of Renee Good on the USA chart, but you had the um, eclipse there.
mhm.
Okay, add to stage.
Let's see if that
I need to
works.
remove this. Hold on. Remove, then add. There we go. There we
Oh,
go.
beautiful. I also have Solar Fire, but I use a Mac and I would have to
Hmm.
run my Windows emulator
No,
and that.
fine. It's fine.
Okay.
We can get to
So
it.
looking at the chart of Minneapolis on the inner wheel and looking at the solar eclipse, I mentioned again, there is that sun moon conjunction, which was the eclipse opposite the Mars, Minneapolis Mars. That Mars was activated. It was ignited, which started that series of events of unrest, chaos, and conflict within the city. And then in addition to that, we also have the eclipse, the Pluto under the eclipse is also in a quincunx, which is not a very not common aspect, but I found that it's a very significant,
very
aspect.
powerful one. I think so too.
Very powerful. So when Pluto is in a quincunx with, where's that moon?
It's square the Pluto for one thing.
Yep, square the Pluto,
and it is quincunx. It is trine, within 3 degrees of trine the eclipse itself, but
let's see here.
It's on, and it's starting. That's the beginning of the trine between Pluto and Uranus before Uranus retrograde.
Okay. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here.
It's such an interesting chart.
It is such an interesting chart. And the thing that I wanted to go more with the Mars is the reason why the Mars is so important is because when I pull up the graphic ephemeris, you're going to see how the Mars throughout the month of January, every aspect that Mars makes to the planets within the city of Minneapolis chart it corresponds with some sort of major event that has happened in the city of Minneapolis. And actually, let me just get into that now, because then I can show you what I mean. So we go to the chart, we go to the graphic ephemeris. I'm actually going to start by December 1st. Actually, no.
Because there was so much going on during that whole time.
Yeah, actually, we'll do September 20th, because I want to start at the eclipse, and then I'll go for 6 months. Okay, let's see. Can it be bigger?
There is a little kind of funny box down at the corner, the lower right-hand corner, that can make it bigger if you need to. And while you're playing with that, I just wanted to bring up, because this is the Minneapolis tri-wheel with the Renee Good killing. So we have that natal chart that we were looking at in there. This is for noon. Both of us are working with noon when we're not working with the geodetic, because there's not a time for that day. And that the lineup was sitting on our Vesta, where we sacrifice ourselves for others, which is interesting that it is so strong. Conjunct Chiron, it's been going through that during the month of January. And then the lineup of planets, it was the Sun Pluto, that was the Alexander Preddy on the outside. This is Renee Good killing, and then the Alexander Preddy. We see with the Alexander Preddy, it was the Sun Pluto conjunction, and that was at 2 degrees in a very tight square to the natal Pluto of the city. So do you have your
yes,
the graphic ready to go?
I have it.
Okay, I'll add it to this. We have to take mine off. Hold on. Remove, then add, as we go sailing around the screen here. Go ahead.
Yes. So quickly before, for anyone who doesn't know, the graphic ephemeris is a depiction, right, of transits, of what is happening in the sky. And the graphic ephemeris can show you what aspects the transiting planets are making. So these planets here, Mars is going down, these planets that are moving up and down are making contacts with the natal planets that are completely straight, horizontal. So whenever there's contact, that tells you that the transiting planets is making some sort of hard aspect to the natal planet, which could be a conjunction, it could be a square, semi-square, sesquiquadrate, whatever it may be, but it is some sort of contact. And the reason why this is important is because hard aspects, specifically the ones that run under the 45-degree modulus, denotes events. It typically triggers some sort of event. So when the eclipse happened back in September, that's when that Mars was activated, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
now, so Mars transited through the planets in November, but it it's not a lot happened in November in Minneapolis. And I was racking my brain because I was thinking, okay, why was January so significant under the same auspices of this eclipse, but the November transits, Mars transits, were not? And this is my intuition. This is not based off of any
Mm-hmm.
astrological research, but
Mm-hmm.
I believe that it became that way because if you look right here, this Pluto
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
making a direct aspect to the city of Minneapolis natal Pluto in
Yep.
early December. And
Yep.
this is interesting because on December, what day was that? On December 4th, 2025, that's when the current administration announced Operation Metro Surge, which
Wow.
enacted the ICE activity to come here.
Unbelievable. Yep.
Yeah. So
Very
literally,
powerful.
yeah, December 4th, 2025, as you can see, that is literally
Mm-hmm.
when the eclipse Pluto, that
Mm-hmm.
transiting Pluto,
Mm-hmm.
made contact to the natal Minneapolis Pluto. And I thought that was, so I thought, okay,
That's
that,
beautiful. That made
that,
painful, but beautiful.
yep, that was the trigger point. That was the trigger point that started the series of events of the crazy January that we had
Mm-hmm.
here in Minneapolis. So from there, when we go from there, it goes down the line. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we had let's see, Mars, Venus, and I'm taking all of these interpretations I actually took from this book, Transits by Reinhold Ebertin. I think
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend it. It's a great
I
book.
recommend.
So I mean, Moon Venus, tactlessness, disputes with women, Moon Node, right?
Mm-hmm.
Disharmonious cooperation, quarrelsomeness, not Moon, Mars Venus, Mars Node, Mars Jupiter, right here. Jupiter is
Mm-hmm.
here.
Mm-hmm.
Mars
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter, that is difficulties with superiors, conflicts with officials, rebelling against the rules. We don't take the Mars ascendant because we don't know the official time. And then keep going down.
Mm-hmm.
Mars
Mm-hmm.
Uranus. Well, the transit Mars and transit Uranus, they came together, but that represents revolutionaries,
Yeah,
freedom fighters.
and that was at the birth of the year. So
Mm-hmm.
that was exact right on the birth of the year. As you can see,
Yep.
as you're putting right on it, and we knew it was going to be a hell of a year. But
Oh yes. So then moving down again, we have Mars Jupiter again, which is uh, rebelling against the rules. And what's very interesting is that Renee Good was murdered on January 7th, 2025. This happened on January 10th, so just a few days before. But then if you
mm-hmm,
go a little
mm-hmm,
further
mm-hmm,
down, if you go to January 7th, I'm not sure if you guys can see the dates on the bottom there as I'm
mm-hmm,
moving.
mm-hmm,
But if you go down to on January 7th, all the way down, you see
mm-hmm.
again that Pluto is aspecting Mercury on the
Right.
exact dates that
Yeah.
Renee
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
murdered.
Yeah. And also, Mars is exalted in Capricorn, and
Mm-hmm.
a planet, it doesn't necessarily mean it's better when it's exalted. It usually means it kicks ass. It's extra strong.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was a strong Mars going through all of those things.
Very strong Mars.
Hmm.
And then if we go back into later into January, I mean, okay, Mars Chiron, I don't really have much research on Chiron, so I won't speak to that just yet. But Mars Saturn is the desire to overcome opposition. So Mars Saturn happened, what, a week? About a little over a week after the Renee Good murder. And that was what really sparked everyone in Minneapolis. We were fired up. Everyone were out they were protesting out in the streets. That was that Mars Saturn energy, that desire to overcome
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
superiors, the authorities, and to fight back. And then if you keep going into down
Yay.
into the month,
Hmm.
we have Mars Moon, which again is violence to the people, violence to women. Um, and it just keeps going and going. And then Mars, what's this next? Um, Mars Sun, irritability, dangers, quarrels. I mean, it was just this Mars was just wreaking havoc throughout the whole month of January. And the one thing that I want to also point out as well is when Alex Preddy was murdered on January 24th. If you go down to January 24th, let's see
Hmm.
here. we see that uh, uh, Pluto and Pluto was crossing Mercury. Pluto and Mars were coming together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
Mars Pluto is represents ruthlessness, violent acts, brutality. And if you remember the way that Alex Preddy was murdered, it was very brutal. It was
Very brutal.
military style. Mars military, Pluto the brutality. That coming together really represented that energy that was happening at the time of his murder. I mean,
Mm.
it's pretty crazy to see how much the astrology depicted the story that has come out of the city, right? Um, and then let's see, and then finally, let's see what's going on here. Towards the end of January, we had Mars, which is basically destruction, conflicts, lack of inner calm. It was a very restless energy in Minneapolis. No one wanted to come out of their homes. People were scared. And the people that were coming out of their homes, they were protesting. There was huge protests. Unfortunately, there were some riots as well. People who weren't actually for the cause, but just wanted to cause mayhem. That's another story. But it was just a lot of upheaval, a lot of civil unrest. And it's just really crazy to me to see how much the astrology depicts that story.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I'm in a, for people that are used to looking at charts instead, this is the Minneapolis chart on the inside that we've been looking at. And with Renee Good and then Alex Preddy, we were just looking at that chart. You've got that Sun Pluto conjunction. So this is good. So good to see them going back and forth. That Mars had just gone into Aquarius, and was well within orb of conjuncting that Pluto and the Sun and the Mercury. And then the week after well, all the planets went from Capricorn power to this really powerful lineup of planets in Aquarius. And I'm seeing that speaking the story of Pluto and Aquarius for the next 2 decades. It is kind of it's power over the people or power from within the people. That's going to be the tension.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that the lineup that all these planets had just gone from Capricorn when Renee Good died into Aquarius, and that the voice of the people and the songs of the people and the music of the people and how it was represented. The press just wishes it was a nice tidy story and done, but it's not. It's just beginning. But we have that Mars proceeded over the next week to conjunct Pluto, then the Sun, then Mercury, just as you said, then Venus, and how stirred up the feelings were
Mm-hmm.
all over the place.
Yeah.
And they were trining that Saturn in the 12th in the chart of the city. So I think there was like, who has power here? There was a real struggle between federal power and the power of the local police and the state police.
Mm-hmm.
But this lineup is sitting right on that Venus. I think Venus, there it's the city is, oh, Pisces, we're water, we're flow, we're spiritual, we're this, but we kick ass when we need to. And there's
Absolutely.
that Venus and Aries that's getting the Saturn and Neptune living out the Venus and Aries, the kind of the fierce anima of the city. Uh, I think, in response to both of that Capricorn lineup and that Aquarius lineup.
Mm-hmm. And if you back in the if you look at the city of Minneapolis chart too, we had Pluto trine the moon, which basically says resilient people. We are people of
Mm-hmm.
resilience. We're a
Mm-hmm.
people of
Mm-hmm.
power. We
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to cause change.
Mm-hmm.
And then I
Mm-hmm.
also wanted to mention something that I forgot was when we were looking at the graphic ephemeris that Pluto Mercury,
Mm-hmm.
around the time that Renee was murdered, Mercury is transportation, vehicles, Pluto is death. So she was killed in her car. So
Oh,
I thought, you know,
sometimes it's so literal, you just it's mind boggling.
yeah, literally, it's incredible in the sense of it's so sometimes it's so hard for me to even grasp. Like, wow, I don't know how people can deny astrology because the more you dig into it, the more you're like, oh, this is kind of scary. What else can this thing do, right?
Right. And the symbols can live out in so many more ways than we can possibly imagine
Yeah.
that I don't, it's like who would have predicted the cartel war in Mexico? Yet it's the perfect example of Saturn Neptune conjunction.
Yep.
It is. And I wanted to put Minneapolis with this coming eclipse because I'd love to hear your take on it, because it's so close to what's going on here. Now I have to take off somebody to to have the room to put something in. They only let me load up so many charts at a time. And from my computer. So how do you see this coming eclipse just in general? That's the, I think it's 10 degrees of Virgo and Pisces.
Yeah, let me pull up the eclipse because unless I see it, the thoughts
Got
don't
it.
come to my head right
Okay,
away.
I'm going to pull it up now. I've got it. There it is.
Okay.
And it is the inner chart are the planets for the Minneapolis. And then there is the 12 to 12 degrees Pisces Virgo. It's 12 degrees. It's exactly conjunct the Minneapolis sun moon. Right on the sun. It's 2 degrees off the moon, but the eclipse is very strong. And it's on, I think of that. We don't know what houses it's in because we did this chart for noon. But if we take it as the noon chart, because sort of what we use for the mythic place, and then the chart can only be 12 hours wrong, but it's a time of intense connection and intense perspective. I think there's going to be a real shakedown, and we don't know which way it goes because that's always free will and grace. It's not astrological. We see the shakedown. How it plays out, that's going to be up to the people.
Yep. I 100% agree. I mean, again, this eclipse is in direct contact with that Pisces stellium that we have within the Minneapolis chart, and it's going to. I mean, first there's going to be some questions around leadership, the sun. There's going to be questions around what are our ideals? What is something that we are here to fight for? What is we? I feel like the people of Minneapolis are starting to realize that we are fighting for something bigger than ourselves, something Neptunian, something that we can't even grasp, right? And then Mercury there as well is how is this affecting trade? Because let's be honest, the ICE activity has affected businesses greatly, and so much so that even some of the Fortune 500 companies that are headquartered here announced a joint statement saying, hey, you guys are going to get this under wraps. Otherwise, the economy is going to tank. We're going to have issues in our businesses, and we may even get out of Dodge here. So, I mean, the trade and commerce aspect is definitely going to be a point of contention in this upcoming eclipse and further on down the line. Yeah.
That's
So,
going
I
to be
mean,
powerful.
it's very powerful, and I don't want to be an alarmist, or I don't want to be someone that is doom and gloom, but there is going to be some sort of reckoning that the city of Minneapolis and even the state of Minnesota that we have to do as a people to figure out where are we going to be headed down the line. Because it looks right there that the eclipse chart is happening on the solar return of the Minneapolis incorporation chart. So not only is this activating destinies, it's also going to, describe what may happen, what's to happen in the upcoming year as well. Not just the 6 months between eclipses, but the upcoming year. It's a lot to discuss, and I'm curious to hear what our leaders are going to say after, apparently ICE activity has decreased. I don't know, again, that Mercury Neptune illusionment through the media, illusionment through leaders. I feel like the Minneapolis residents are no longer, they no longer trust what they're hearing from the media, from our leaders.
Right. They know better. And I think that that's part of the Virgo moon in the eclipse, and the Virgo moon in the natal chart is an ability to discriminate, to kind of in a good way, to kind of sort out what's crap and what's real, and that it's not an easy town to bamboozle. In general, they tend to be fairly reserved, and you wouldn't
Mhm.
know it from the recent display. From the outside looking into Minneapolis, it's being held up as the best example of nonviolent protest we've had since the civil rights movement. That the massive amounts of people that are speaking up, that are showing up in the cold, and if you haven't lived there, you don't know what that wet cold is like in
Oh,
Minneapolis. It is
it
bone
hurts.
chilling. Yeah.
It
I
hurt.
was at a few of those protests when I was living there, the Women's March at 7 degrees. It hurts. But so, they did it. They showed up. They put in
Mhm.
the energy. How do we take that and use that as an example? And they have lost people, and that martyrdom, the that sense of what's missing, what happened, that is so much of the Pisces time period. Neptune is just leaving Pisces. Neptune will be out, is not going back for, another 140 some years. And that place, because it's a 160 some year cycle, but it has that power of, the martyr. It's why they moved Christ's birthday to, the day of the death day to was originally supposedly a Pisces, and we have
Mhm.
the story around Easter is about that sense of sacrifice. That's a
Mhm.
very Neptunian myth. All religions have somebody descended, was sacrificed, and learned something, and came up stronger, and taught us, whether it was Isis or Christ or Inanna, and in some ways the city is asked in that original piece about what do we sacrifice and how do we come back up, and use this as a positive example that change can happen, that we don't have to give in to abuse of power,
Mhm.
but how do we hold strong with that. And I'm hoping that they can, now that Saturn and Neptune are out of Pisces, that Minneapolis, after this chapter, because a chapter, as you can see from this solar return, it's going to be a hell of a year. But after this year, maybe it can step off the example of martyrdom. Maybe it can step out of the Pisces offering, which has
Mhm.
been on since Philando and George and the children were murdered in the church. And also, I forgot Hartman, your administrator, the representative who was shot in her bed
Oh,
with
yes,
her
yes.
husband. We've had one martyr after another in that
Yeah.
city in this last instance with Neptune in Pisces. And I'm hoping that we can clear that mythology from the city after
Mhm.
this time.
Totally agree. And one thing that I wanted to add with the Saturn Neptune conjunction is that this is likely going to be a time of the erosion of the foundation that Minneapolis was built on and needing to rebuild something new on top of it.
That's
Because
powerful.
I mean Neptune is that dissipation, that eroding at slowly at that Saturn foundation, that Saturn pillar, and Saturn is slowly disintegrating. All of the people are starting to wake up like, wait a minute, what are we even doing? What are our leaders doing? What can we do to like actually make sure that we're good? I mean, people can't really get jobs. I mean, uh the cost of living is so high. People can't purchase homes. People can't even afford food. They're starting to realize that the current structures that are at bay needs to be eroded, needs to be torn down, and that's really what I would like to see this
Yeah.
the Saturn Neptune conjunction play out as, is that let's start to erode, let's chip away at these structures so we can build something better on top of it.
Right. And I think of it like the river eroding away, softening those old forms and creating new ones, because
Exactly.
riverbeds are always changing their course.
Exactly.
And I think that's a beautiful description. And I wanted to say again that I don't think that a planet aspect makes us do something. I don't think you looked at this and said, "Oh, a lot of people are going to die in Minneapolis." I think it's more like, well, they could, but it's how do we take it? How can we use it well? It's not predestination so much as these people have died. How can we use them in a good way as a martyr? How can we honor what they've offered us and learn from them and take the and work with it in a good way, not say this is just an offering and it's cannon fodder. It's not predestined, but it can offer us wisdom with it.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Thank you so much, Sunmi. Any other last questions, any comments that you want to make for our audience, besides how to find you again?
No other comments. I thought this was it's just always, this stuff always gets me going because it's so fun to see and study. And once you know better, you do better, and you work with the stars. You work with these planets to build out the life that you envision for us and envision for the world. But I mean, if you really enjoyed my perspective and the way I look at the charts, you could feel free to send me an email, consciouscreatrix@icloud.com. You could also reach me at ncgrnorthstar.org, where I lead monthly conversations with our local community. We also host virtual Zoom meetings too for people who may not be able to come with us locally. But yeah, my books are open. I love to do astrology. I love to do tarot as well. So whoever is interested, I'm open and ready to receive whatever you would like to share.
Thank you so much, Sunmi. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for having me on. Hopefully I could be on again with you soon.
Yes, take care.